When my heart breaks,
Some things have been happening that might be related.
when my world shakes,
Cold shower, falling off my roof, and my heels are on the ground.
All right, ShotDeck. Look at this. We got a shot talk, and this one, I know I say I'm always excited, but seriously, I can't be more excited because this movie is the biggest movie of all time at Warner Brothers, which, as somebody who makes a lot of movies at Warner Brothers, it's a little bit like these jerks. Like they took over the mantle, but well deserved. And it's Barbie, of course, and we have DP extraordinaire Rodrigo Prieto and the director Greta Gerwig, who I'm super excited to talk to both about this wonderful film you made, which does this incredible thing, which is really hard to do, which is to both be incredibly popular and make a lot of money for a lot of people, which is also what the film business is at times, and also move people, moves me and my family, who we all saw it together. My 6-year-old daughter enjoyed it immensely. And me, myself, brought me to tears at a couple places. And that sort of combination is really hard to do. So let me start first by saying, just how did you guys meet? Why Rodrigo? I'll start with you, Greta. Why Rodrigo? Because obviously you have a pick of the litter. Yeah, exactly. I know, and this is what he asked me to ask you this, because he wanted to know.
No, I mean, I met Rodrigo a couple years earlier, and he's just always been one of my favorite cinematographers, like ever. And I loved his cinematography before I even knew to concentrate on it. Like, it was just, I loved disparate films that he had happened to shoot. And it's like, when I first went through the process of realizing, oh, the thing I like, it wasn't until college that I started putting together, like, that I was watching directors as much as anything. And then it was like, I realized that Rodrigo had shot all of these different movies. And I was like, well, that's got to mean something. And it felt like, I mean, it's like describing why you're drawn to an actor in some way. It's like a kind of imperceptible thing that you feel that they have something they share with you, and they also have something beyond what you know. They have that will make what you're trying to do even greater than what you could have articulated yourself. And I mean, I just am always struck by every movie he has worked on, how much it almost feels like the language of cinema that he works within is invented anew for each story. It's emotional, and it's story. There's not like one thing I could say it's this. It's almost like it's like in the DNA of the movie shifts the way he looks at things. And I don't know that's the best, I think, version that I can think of being, the kind of DP that I love. And yeah, and the images are just ridiculously beautiful. Also, now I'm like so spoiled. So it was, in a way, when I was like, I'm going to try for Rodrigo, and obviously Margot knew Rodrigo, they'd worked together. I kind of was like, well, shoot for the moon. Like, why not? I was in a way that he said yes. I was like, oh my God. Oh, great. Well, I didn't prepare for the part where we actually.
All right, so then Rodrigo, why'd you say yes? I mean, it's also, you do have an incredibly diverse filmography. It's one of the most diverse of any cinematographer I can think of. But also, this actually sits uniquely in that filmography in terms of its look and feel. But yeah, what was interesting about the film to you, and why'd you jump on board?
Well, yes. Also, when we met, Greta and I just loved her energy. It was just one of those things. I love this person. She's amazing and so full of just beautiful energy and ideas and enthusiasm. And so I thought I'd really like to, at some point work with her in a movie. And so then when I was on prep of Killers of the Flower Moon in Oklahoma in the middle of COVID, and and those dark times, and I get a call from Greta telling me, I'm going to do this movie Barbie, and I'm like, okay, it's a perfect antidote. I'm like, yes, I love this idea. And so it was great, and immediately right away, we started talking about ideas and concepts, and Greta already had a series of references, and and was sending me all these images, and then from ShotDeck, right? I don't know.
Yes. No, really. Yeah.
And
Shout
and
out.
also Sarah Greenwood was in some of those Zooms we were doing, and we didn't need masks. We were on Zoom, so that was good. But it was perfect. I mean, for me, it was just the ideal thing to move on to right after Killers of the Flower Moon, which is also amazing, to work on and shoot, and but a whole different energy, obviously. And I just love the opportunity to once I read the script, to explore so many things about myself through these characters too. It was an opportunity to reflect on masculinity and femininity and our roles in society, and and so I realized it went much deeper than let's say just a fun ride with the dolls.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it seems like I think I heard maybe it was a New York Times article or something, but it seemed like research was also a part of your process to even crack the script, because the script feels like a real big swing anyway to just take that on, right? I'm sure it was at times nerve-wracking to be like, how do you beat something as sort of broad and sweeping as like converting a Barbie doll into a movie, right?
Yeah.
And do you have a similar process when you then go, okay, now I'm directing this thing, now let's get in? How does your prep process start? It's something all our users really are interested in.
Sure. I mean, I initially, Noah and I were just meant to write the script. I didn't know
Right.
that I was going to direct it. And it wasn't until we had this script that I loved that I thought, oh, I don't want anyone else to direct this. I want to do it. But at the same time, like, I just thought no one would ever let me do it. So I think there was a point in the writing process too, where we were like, this will never get made, so we might as well write it. Like, it just was sort of like, it was like, let's go for broke, because what's the harm? I mean, this will just exist as one of those stories that people pass around a script and say, did you ever hear about that one? And it didn't get made. And I think in a way, I almost need to separate my writing brain from my directing brain, because I almost have to not know what I'm asking of myself or my team while I'm doing it, because I think it would limit me. So in a way, there were plenty of meetings, I mean, just later, where there was a lot of like, how are we going to do this? And I was like, well, we're going to figure this out. Like, it wasn't like, I know how we're going to do it. I knew sort of how it should sound and how it should feel, but like actually figuring out how to execute everything was, it required many, many meetings. But I think I was right away had this idea of it taking place within the world of Barbie Land was the world of like Technicolor soundstage musicals. Like, that was the world. I was already really early, I was already pulling images from Vincent Minnelli musicals and Roger, the Gene Kelly musical, like things that felt extremely heightened and artificial, and kind of that also that pop aesthetic of those musicals as well, because they would do things like that were almost gestural. Even in things like Oklahoma, they would do those, the Dream Ballet and the sets that were just like the barn, that's just the outline of the barn, or Leslie Caron in An American in Paris. It was like these washes of color. So it felt like there was a connection there. And part of that's just because I like it. And part of it was because Barbie was invented in 1959. So I felt like there was a kind of grounding in that we could build off of. So I didn't really know how we were going to do it, other than that's what I liked. And I think even in my initial, discussions with Rodrigo and Sarah, and Michael Sharp, who's one of the producers who's doing the budget, and he was initially saying, well, we'll probably want to shoot in like Australia or Los Angeles so we can have beat. the beach. And I was like, oh no, everything's inside. The whole thing's inside, which I realized, that seemed quite obvious to me, but I realized it was obvious to no one else that this whole movie would be interior in a way. And that the first time you'd ever see real sunlight is when they go to the real worlds. I mean, I had all these references, but I've never shot a movie like this, so it was
that's what I was wondering, right? Like you go, I feel like for Lady Bird, which is super location based seemingly, and Little Women, I'm sure there maybe were some built sets. This is a brand new thing, and even for Rodrigo, these sets seem quite big, and you're replicating daylight. Let's just get into a little technical stuff, because I've struggled with big daylight representations on stages before. First of all, they never feel big enough, and you can never get the sources far enough away. So take me into a little bit of just when you started thinking about where'd you guys shoot most of it? In London?
Yes.
Or in America? Yeah.
No, in London.
And in
Leeds and in London. Yeah.
And so so thinking about that, so much of it was going to be created with incredible production design. By the way, Sarah should have been on this because it's crazy good. And so I'm curious a little bit technically about, just give us a little inside baseball about how you attacked that, and what kind of things you did to sort of, put what really, even though it has an artifice to it, the representation of what feels like daylight is actually really pure to me. And so tell me about that.
Well, indeed, Greta early on was talking about this concept of artificial authenticity. Is that the correct term? Roughly?
Yes, or authentically artificial.
There we go. And so certainly we're embracing the fact that we're in a studio, and that's part of that aesthetic, and we have cutouts instead of mountains, and literally they're painted, and the palm trees, depending on how far they are from camera, but some of them were 3D, but some were 2D, and some were just flats that were cut out, and they were pretty close to the camera, actually. So the feeling is being in a box, and it was, how big is this box? And we wanted to feel the walls, and the sky is painted, actually. And we wanted that tactile feeling of it. But at the same time, we wanted it to feel like it's outside. So it's precisely that for the lighting was a challenge, because exactly like you say, it's really hard to get sunlight or moonlight to look right. And so I guess I had the advantage of it. It wasn't meant to be completely realistic, but I did want it to feel like it is the sun. But one of the rules we set early on was that it would always be sunny in Barbie Land. And then it became, okay, it's always sunny, but it's always backlit in Barbie Land as well, right? So one advantage of shooting inside is that you can place the sun. And as you know, Larry, one of the big challenges of shooting on actual locations is scheduling so that the sun is in the proper position, and it's very complicated. So in this case, I basically had soft suns was the tool to create the sun. And on the stage, for example, where we had the cul-de-sac and Barbie's dream house, we had 5 suns in different positions. One of them was mobile. We had one with a blue coating on it on a scissor lift that we could move around, and the other soft suns were rigged to different specific positions on the stage, and also we're on rails. We could move them back and forth and tilt them. So these were 100,000 watt soft suns, which give this the brightness, depending on the level of fill light, but of sun, but also are semi-soft. They're
right.
They're hard, but they're big, so that the shadows aren't as harsh, and that's helps it be a little less forgiving. But the advantage of them also is you can dim them. So sometimes there were shots where the camera would pan from one side of the set to the other, and wait a minute, if we just kept that one sun, we'd break our own rule. Now the sun is first backlit, and then it's front lit or 3/4 front lit, So what we did is we dim out one sun and dim up the other sun. And, it looks, somehow you put it together and it looks like it is the one sun, but it's, a couple of suns. Anyway, it was challenging. And another issue I had was the bounce off of the set itself. And we created this lookup table that Greta gave the name Techno Barbie, which I'll explain in a moment. But this really enhanced the popped the pinks and also the cyans and the yellows, and the colors of Barbie Land were really saturated, but very pure. This lookup table made the colors look very simple in a way and pure. But certainly you put a big backlight on these characters, and then everything that's behind the camera or in front of the actors bounces all this pink light back onto their faces. And with the techno Barbie look, they look like like magenta peaches or something. So we had to buy tons of gray material, and we drape everything off camera with just it wasn't negative fill, it was neutral fill, so that there would be bounce, but it would be neutral without color. And then I'd key light or whatever, but so it was a pretty big challenge. And then there are different times of day in Barbie Land too, obviously, and so that meant setting looks for the sky also, with lighting. It was all just colors and intensities of lighting. And so in pre-production we tested many different colors and intensities of light that whenever Greta would say, okay, the scene is night, boom, we'd night scene 22, so we change the lighting to the night look or the disco night.
But that's the same backing?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember we did all those tests of the different skies with different lightings from below, because we were sort of seeing, could we light it from like behind the mountains to give it that kind of like the sun just dipped look.
Yeah.
And I also remember there was a big discussion with Sarah about because kind of playing with a level of artificiality and relative flexibility. We talked about, do we want to paint the shadows onto the sets?
Right.
That was an idea for a while, like paint the angle, but then it was like, no, because then that's going to get too difficult. But it was like we thought about having the palm tree shadow just painted on the set.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but then like you say, it's sort of then is fixed in there.
Yeah, when you have the sun on the other side, it would just kill it. It would kill the fake shadow. So that's why we didn't quite do that.
Because when everything you're looking at is a decision, it's a different it's not there's no, it all has to be decided and created. Nothing just happens.
Right.
Which I
and none of it is, and all of it is relatively in camera whenever you can. Like I mean, there's places in here which of course must be set extensions of in a way like a shot like this, of course.
Yeah.
But it's seamless and quite well done, obviously. But my assumption, perhaps when I was rewatching it again, was, well, maybe for the control of this backing and the mountains and stuff, maybe that was a partial backing, but then you enhanced it mostly or something like that.
That big beach shot, like we built like a sort of a portion of the beach up to it's hard to explain, but up to this like lighthouse. But then the beach sort of it stops kind of after the lifeguard tower. But then Sarah and the miniatures crew had made the whole beach in miniatures. So then we weren't literally like doing old school compositing, but then all of that texture and all of that that was created by the miniatures team was then captured by the visual effects.
Right.
It was just very important to me that everything feel quite there. And that we always asked ourselves in every shot, even though we did use visual effects, that we were always asking ourselves, how would we do this if we didn't have any? Like, or if we only had visual effects that would have been available in like the 60s or something, how would we have done this shot? Would we have done it with a little car? So there was a lot of that kind of, because I wanted us to always know the how of it. Physical. I think that's because toys are physical, and it was important that it not feel like endless to me, but that something you could touch.
And were these little cars moving around? Was that part? Did you have a miniature team that actually? Because there's a couple of shots where obviously the car is so wide and small that looks literally like a car driving through a set. I mean, like a toy car.
Like the sort of desert where they drive through. They did build a miniature of that desert, and we didn't literally do a miniature car, but the VFX group put the car in. Does that make sense? Like,
yes,
they used that, but then they did it in their way. Although that's a set.
Yeah, this I assume was a set, but the actual, like, when you sort of squint, it feels like the way you would take an iPhone out and play with a little Barbie and see if you make a little movie out of it. It really felt like that exact thing.
I think that was sort of also part of the idea, was this somehow world in between, which is miniature, but it's not. You know, they're not supposed to be tiny, or are they? Yes. Oh, are they miniature? No. You know, it's like that. What is it? So, but we did want it to feel somewhat like a miniature or this box, you know, so that's why when we were doing testing, we tested all sorts of formats and cameras and film and different digital cameras, and we ended up using the Alexa 65 because of the size of the sensor. Gave us the feeling of a big camera in a maybe not exactly a miniature, but a small place, you know, because of the depth of field. If you have a smaller sensor, then it's, you know, like a Super 35 sensor. And to get to that, I shot some tests of an actual Barbie doll with a miniature version of our test shoot, which was all these colors of Barbie land with a little chair and, you know, little things like that, and just basically squares of color, which we had in real scale of a human. And I photographed with the same lens so the same field of view, the Barbie doll, and then standing a woman at the equivalent distance scaled with the different formats. And we saw certainly the Alexa 65 on the real person is what felt a little closer to photographing an actual Barbie. So, but one thing that Greta was keen on is that the look shouldn't feel completely like a miniature, or the background's too out of focus, because we did want to see
like swing and shift or something, where like,
right,
you know,
we
how,
didn't
like,
want
you
that
make
extreme.
Exactly right.
Yeah,
You didn't want to go there.
It was finding that balance also with the depth of field and the f-stop, but at least starting with a big sensor gave me the option of playing with the depth of field and being as shallow as we wanted, or deeper in an instant, you know. So that was very, very practical. But it was fun to just come up with, you know, these looks, and, you know, and you're showing some frames that I don't know if we should jump into the transportation.
Yeah, jump into it. Oh, I would love to, because I also am curious, sort of. I don't know if this came from the research, because I didn't have a bunch of Barbies as a kid. Only about 10 of them. No, but I don't remember this sort of diorama idea, or this sort of, but it's one of the sort of really fun and stylized things that really is noteworthy in the film, as far as the transitions to and from, you know, Barbie Land and how they get there. Where did that come from?
That took a while, right, Greta? Just figuring it out.
I always saw it as like, as being in camera and sort of silly, like that there was a silliness to it. I actually I love, this is not something anyone would necessarily think of, but I really love those Old Spice commercials. You know,
well, that's a great reference, yeah. But that makes sense.
Yeah, I love them. And I actually talked to the director of the Old Spice commercials, and I was like, and how did you do that? And he was like, we did it 116 times. And that the commercial is shot 100, and like, it was, because they really did do, you know, they had, and it was kind of amazing. And I was like, well, I probably won't have that much time, but I love that. I loved that idea. And then I had a memory of making, I mean, so much of this comes from childhood, which always felt like, even though Barbie didn't directly have this, it felt like something you could make as a child. I remember making moving shoebox dioramas, where I had the background on pencils that I could roll, so that it looked like there was movement. And I remember I was in 4th grade or something, and I felt so satisfied by this, like, thing that was static but created the sense of movement. And so I was thinking about that kind of moving dioramas, and then the art department mocked up like a kind of not a previs, but like an idea of what it would be. And then they made like the little sets with the 3 planes of movement that could show us what it could be. But it had satisfying, I mean, it was so satisfying to watch it, because it was all these like fun in-camera things, like the sort of foreground on a treadmill going around, which is pretty fun and terrific. And then like a guy dragging the lines on the car on the road, so that it looks like movement. All of that stuff is just really fun. And then even just the satisfaction of the math of how it all works. Like I haven't done math in a minute, but it's like, oh no, I know right. I can imagine the math that makes it like make sense. I remember there was one day we were shooting and we were like slightly off of the mark, and it was a disaster.
Yes.
Remember that day, Rodrigo?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I do. But you know, the when I read the script, the transportation sequence was simply, and then she's on a spaceship, and then you know they're on a boat, and it didn't describe how. And in fact, most of the script was like that, just these wacky ideas, but it could go any way. So at first I thought, okay, maybe, okay, should we do this in the volume and the camera's swirling around and, you know, we're going around the vehicles. And then, you know, as soon as we really started talking about things in the practicality of the way Greta wanted it and the physicality of it. And then, you know, there was this reference, which is very random, but I remember talking about Mystery Train, Jim Jarmusch, and these tracking shots with the two Japanese tourists, the kids, and the camera's just, you know, they're on the sidewalk and the camera's on the car or something, and it's just traveling very flat onto the wall, sideways to them. And that was one of the references to why don't we, you know, track with these vehicles, so the vehicle doesn't move in frame, and everything else is moving, and then that evolved into all of, you know, this stuff. And Sarah and her team, I mean, they were incredible coming up with all these ideas of all these strings and the dolphins, you know, going around and someone's literally moving. So they designed it all, and my part was certainly very technical of figuring out what's the focal length. What exactly the lens see, you know, and what distance, even just simply from how do we fit all these sets on a soundstage, you know, so we need how many feet of, you know, it was a math, exactly. Like,
did you use, and this is sort of a general question for the movie, because I don't know if this experience for you, Greta, brought in some new tools, whether it was previs or more storyboarding than you had ever done before, or those kind of things, because obviously previs can be used just to figure out how to fit something in a stage. Right. Or, you know, or the tools we have now to just like work out the math and how, and was it all the same focal length, generally speaking, for these? Yeah. Right.
Oh, it was.
Do you remember what it was?
I think it was a 75 millimeter.
All of those, I mean, this actually, for this sequence, for a couple of the sequences, kind of being able to model it out it was the first time I'd done that, and it was extremely helpful. Although not perfect, because someone can be like, but the model does this, but this is not how it goes, which was also like an important lesson in it. But for things like when we'd be looking at, because we were, you know, I wanted it to look like we had access to 20 sound stages, and we didn't.
Oh, by the way, it seemed like that. I would have guessed you had every sound stage in England.
We did. We did take over quite a few more sound stages than we were initially going to. But so it's some of that stuff was also like, because, you know, there was just like, you know, like exactly what you were saying at the beginning of needing the height to get the lights up high enough was a big thing. And also to get the height of everything we were trying to get. And how is then he going to rig the ceiling? And that kind of, became, then we'd see like, okay, well, we used our biggest stage for this set, now we're going to have to make some kind of accommodation for this other set, and being able to be like, okay, if it was this, being able to actually what is called Farsight. Farsight was the thing where you could have it was like a camera, it wasn't a camera, but it was like a
virtual.
Doodad you held in your hand, and you could sort of virtually be placed in the stage, and then we could populate it also to figure out like, well, how many people do we need? Like what makes it look, is it too many? And those tools aren't perfect, but it was helpful in doing something that I had to kind of make decisions on before I could see it. Whereas like when I was doing things, I mean, Little Women, there were some builds, but it was really location based, and I could go there and look and take pictures. I could just get people to stand around and figure it out. And it was incredibly helpful for making decisions before I had the thing in front of me. And it was the most I'd ever storyboarded, which it's the same thing. It's incredibly useful, and it's incredibly useful for departments. And also it's not it functions differently than a movie does. So something could work in storyboards that actually when you're sitting with it in the editing room, it doesn't work the same way. Which is it's something that I kind of figured out as I was like, oh, this is helpful. And I'm glad we have all of this stuff, and particularly for the opening sequence. And there were a few sequences that it was really helpful for, but also it made me realize, these are all tools and they're only as good as they help everyone to be making the same movie, but they're not themselves the movie.
Of course, exactly. But it has some utility. I've certainly found those tools. At least they also deal more in specifics than they used to, right? At least like you go, oh, I can put a real lens on there and know field of view and distance from stage walls and all that kind of stuff, which are actually technically really important.
But then we actually, we did all that sort of previous kind of thing for, say, the transportation sequence, but then we actually had to go with a real viewfinder and have, a mock-up of the car and actually see, oops, you know what? Actually, it's a little more like this or like that. And, so there was a lot of that and running back and forth testing, even as we were shooting. We had a second unit helping us out enormously. And they would, for example, these sequences we shot, but they would prepare them, they would set up the camera and it would go around and say, no, the camera has to be 3 inches higher. Okay, bye. And, and back and forth, a lot of that. But the energy was just crazy. I was thinking, talking about the size of the sound stages, Larry, you had that shot of the beach, the big sort of high angle shot where you see the depth of the beach and the ocean.
Yeah.
You'll notice, if you watch closely, you'll see the trick of the lighting, because you see the keystone, I think it's called, right? Of her shadow compared to the shadow of the next people.
Yes.
Extrapolate that, then the shadow would go to the other side, right? So
that's a function of like being not a real sun a million or whatever, a billion miles away or whatever it is, right?
That's exactly what it is.
Also, I think one thing that we talked about a lot about, I was going to say, but I mean, any number of shots you could do this with, is we talked a lot about with visual effects, like, obviously when we have the painted skies, which we do often, that, horizon lines are can be wrong depending on wrong, but it also lets but it's there's like a physicality to it. So it was also about, if we were going to do VFX extension of a space, is keeping in the imperfections that would have been there if we had double the space and built it in forced perspective, or if we, whatever it was, it was like, let's play with what the actual imperfection would be and see if that doesn't create something that's exciting. So a lot of it was also figuring out how to marry these two things. And then this is the different sequence, but I'd never worked on
Oh, I was wondering about that. Did you do any volume?
Well, I'd never worked on a volume. I'd worked with like LED as an actor, like driving scenes.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
But I'd never done it as a director. And the sequence that I think of it in Barbie Land, her driving around, that was really helpful on that stage. And 2001, the open.
2001 was volume stuff.
Yep.
Okay, well let's talk about that for a second. Was 2001 always meant to open the film, or was it, because when I first saw it in the trailer, I went, that's the best trailer I've ever seen as far as a teaser. But I actually didn't think it was going to be the opening of the film. I thought, oh, maybe this is just a teaser,
It was always the opening of the movie. And I always knew, we talked about, some of these plates are actually his plates. We got permission to use the plates from the movie.
Well, here's before and after. So you took their plates.
He took their,
like, this is their, oh yeah, it's exactly their plate, but look at you.
I know.
We call it time that you are.
Yeah.
We like broke down the shots and everything, but we actually talked about for 15 seconds if we wanted to actually do front projection. But then that was, I think
14 seconds.
14 seconds. I think it was you that was like, that would take forever.
I was like, better not.
Well, you know what? It's interesting about that conversation, because you go like, well, it's so old school and all that, but in a way, if that technology exists then, that's what they would have used as well, right? This is,
That's what we thought. That's what we said.
That's exactly what we said. We're like, okay, if Kubrick were here now and he were making that sequence, it would be in a volume stage for sure.
For sure.
So that's the
I
way
agree. I think he would have embraced it. He would have embraced it for some of the stuff 2001 and all
100%.
that. Yeah,
Sure
I
would have.
agree.
So
I agree.
what visual effects did is that those plates that, like Greta was saying, lots of those shots in the beginning are from the original plates, but then some of the shots, were plates that we made or we had, and then visual effects extended them, the land and the sky, for everything that's out of shot. So it's not just the background, it's everything else. So it surrounds the
of course.
There's a shot where they're combing, I think, or giving tea to the dolls or something.
Yeah.
In a shot like that, you can see the reflection on the head of the doll, of the sky, and all these things that to create without a volume, it's possible, but it's just kind of a big nightmare, So this allowed us to really have them kind of in the environment because they're lit by the sky itself, or the fake sky, if you may. But that was all created by the volume, especially that sort of soft feel of a soft sun, sort of 3/4 backlit sun. But there are other shots where there is actual hard sunlight that the volume is not capable of doing. So for those shots, we did have an 18K fresnel like that, with
of course,
full CTO, and so that's that hard light. But everything else, the light on her face and on the dolls, that's the volume stage. And it's complicated. That was a learning process for me too. Just like Greta, I'd only done smaller versions of volume for driving shots, and which I thought were pretty effective on The Irishman, for example. But this was opportunity to do it for in a big scale. And the scenes of her driving through the main street of the town. For those, what we did is, again, the visual effects team scanned all these miniatures that had been made. That's one of the shots, but there might be a frontal shot of her driving. And so on the volume, you had all this, so let's say, fake environment that was created from the miniatures that would, on the volume stage, move around her. And
for that reason, so also the way obviously we don't strictly stick to this, but it was also like we were looking at a lot of movies where they were using rear projection for driving scenes, and how much I liked that look, and kind of thinking about even like limiting some camera angles to what you would have if you were using rear projection.
Yes.
Okay, it would go like this, and even though we're going to do the version that's possible in 2023, that was even like informing limitations that we gave ourselves.
But this frontal two shot through the front windscreen,
it's like that, although those in particular were on that set. That wasn't a volume,
that wasn't a volume.
But this, you have enough space. You have enough space to, obviously you're not moving the car, meaning on this reverse, you're on that set. What is this background?
So the background is the painted background is, they painted it in not quite miniature, but like 3/4 minute. I mean, it was miniature, but big, and that was used as the background. But the space was almost like a wider space, so it was a strip of road, and then we had.
And that was it literally moved.
The car did move. The car did move, but it didn't move as much as you see here.
Sure.
Does that make sense? But it did drive, and we did swing it around. And I remember, it's a different shot, but in the volume stage, there was one shot where the car didn't move, but the volume moved, and then we dollied and panned.
Okay, that's a shot in front of LAX of the airport, and the car is driving past the camera, and the camera and the shot, what you see is the camera is panning with the car. The camera seems to be in a fixed position. It's a pass by. The camera just pans around with the car.
Oh,
but
sure.
That in the volume, that was a whole different story because the car wasn't moving. So we had to move the camera very fast on a motion control track. I think it was motion control, must have been. And then pan the camera, and the all the lighting of the volume or the set that was input into the volume would move accordingly, was attached to the camera, so that the end result seems as if the camera is not moving, just panning. it was pretty bizarre to see it actually as you were shooting, and the camera like zooming on this dolly and panning back, and then you saw the monitor and it looked like the camera was just panning around the car. It was pretty bizarre.
And did you leave that experience thinking, I might use this technology in the future, or at least I guess it becomes part of your tool set of like, okay, yeah, this could be a as a director.
Yeah. I think the thing that I realized while we were doing it is that everything we were using, that probably because it takes me, a certain amount of time to write and get the next one going, everything felt like it was changing really fast. So it felt like it's useful to know that we can do this, but I'm pretty sure that the next time I'm doing this, there's going to be an iterated version of it.
Sure.
I mean, for this, I can't imagine any other way to have done it. I think it's also like every project has a different level of requirement of what you want to do. And I think, again, to go back to the authentically artificial, it felt right to embrace all of this and to say like, okay, well, this is the 2022 version of what those ideas were. But yeah, I don't know, Rodrigo, how do you feel about the volume after this?
No, I enjoyed it. I thought that it indeed was the right tool to use for this. So the one frustration for me is, I'm going to get geeky here, but is the spectrum of color.
Yes, of course.
You can reproduce with these LED panels, because they're made as monitors. They're not made to light something originally, so the reflection you get from the skin and from the objects is not the full spectrum of color. Yeah. It's limited, like spikes. So skin tone was tricky. So we actually had to create a special LUT for the volume, which kind of tried to make it look like the colors were natural. But in fact, if you just shoot it just straight, it just looks weird. If you say instead of having a landscape on the volume stage, you have just white or neutral 5600 Kelvin color, the skin looks kind of magenta, but it's weird. You can't really color time it out. So anyway, that's the one thing that I think is the next step for the volume.
I think that's also where they're looking to improve. And shout out to Yvonne Lucas, who just won like a Film Light Color Award for coloring Barbie. So yeah, it's the skin tones are incredible in the movie. All right, I know because we have limited time. I want to hit one thing with you. There's these two things. They may be the same, but this kind of incredible dance number that is maybe speaks to some of the references you were talking about, Greta, in terms of those 40s and 50s musicals, but also this sort of this lovely scene at the end. Yeah, and it's funny because it's so subtle, but then you're seeing it's a white void scene, but like I don't know, like Heaven Can Wait or whatever. But now suddenly it's like in a new way. So tell me a little bit about creatively how that came together.
Well, that was a big question mark, just like the transportation scene and other moments of, okay, what is this space going to be like? And it wasn't clear from the beginning. And indeed, Heaven Can Wait and these references were in our minds. But Greta, at one point, if I remember correctly, came up with the idea of color. Let's make a space that's imbued with color. How do we do that? What color? So then we started thinking about hiring famous artists, let's say installation artists who work with color, and
like Terrell, like you're like, let's bring in James Terrell.
Yes,
James Terrell and Olafur Eliasson,
right?
Were
exactly.
both did those light installations.
Oh yeah.
That was one idea. And then, of course, that wasn't happening. It wasn't coming together. And, we work in practicality in the movie world. And it's, okay, we need to define the equipment. All these things. So then I went on 1 weekend. I went to see an exhibit of Turner paintings. And just looking at his paintings and the skies in his paintings, I thought, what about those skies? What about instead of it being a white limbo or just colors, because the whole movie has colors already, the colors are taken from an artist that paints these incredible skies. So I took pictures of lots of those paintings, took them to Greta, and she really liked these colors. And so what we did is, with the visual effects team, we selected a series of the colors from these paintings and created an animation that kind of had this movement that you see in the film. And we didn't have access to the volume set stage anymore, which, by the way, was a good thing, I think, at the end, because what we did was actually use a big back screen projection screen that had behind it these sumo lights that are strips of LEDs that can project video information onto anything, right? To diffusion, for example. So that's what was in the background. It was a pretty big background with this lighting effect that was an animation, and then the lighting on the actors was also the same sumo lights, in this case through magic cloth diffusion. So their faces are lit by the same exact random animation of color, so they're immersed in this space. And then the floor itself, what are they standing on, right? So crazily, I think this reference actually came from Stairway to Heaven, from the beach, right? Greta, remember? There's a shot on the beach where the pilot, his plane crashes, and and then he finds himself in this wet beach, and the texture of it we loved, and so that's what inspired the sort of wet flora on this stage. So there were references that you would never think.
Well, I think like that's interesting, because people sometimes they think references and they think, oh, you're like copying this. It's never that. It's always like a leaping off point to have, right? Wouldn't you say, Greta, in terms of like, it's just, it never actually even lines up. If you said that's the reference and then showed it, they'd be like, I don't see it. It's right.
Never.
Absolutely.
Never. I mean, in a way, I also feel like, the reason I like references and talking about it, it's like, first of all, it's fun to watch movies. We watched a ton of movies while we were making this. We watched a movie every Sunday. I programmed a movie and set out the invite to cast and crew, and we, obviously we watched things like 2001, but we also watched things like Stairway to Heaven or Mon Oncle. It's not that literally what we're trying to do is recreate anything. It's just a reminder. It's like a way to activate your own creativity, and you're like, oh, movies can be anything. Exactly. Okay, I like this, well, can we do it like this? And I feel like it's the way I like to think, and then it gets, for me, it gets me out of my own way. But yeah, this scene really, this was such a beautiful set, and to know how to do this wasn't intuitive, but that's, the way it looks on film is the way it looked to your eye.
That's great.
And embracing that the colors would be changing all the time and how it would feel. It was extremely, the set itself was emotional, and there was something in the kind of the vastness, but that kind of dipped in color feeling that was, and that these are colors that don't exist really in the rest of the movie. They don't feel like they're part of the rest of the movie. They feel like they're sort of more elemental or something, or something about it that as soon as we had it, it was really couldn't have been.
And then, which I just want to touch on underneath it, because it really then, this is when obviously the tear ducts open up, is when you cut to this incredibly real footage. That, in a movie that's like, exactly, it has so much of it is like handmade and made in a stage and all that.
What was I made for? 'Cause
Where is this footage from?
Who made the movie?
That's so beautiful.
Crew. It's a lot of people in cast and crew. It's their moms and daughters and friends and aunts, and there are also people in this who aren't here anymore. And I'd never had this happen. I was doing the junket, and one of the journalists started crying, and they said, "I think my friend's in this."
Oh wow!
And he was like, "She would have loved it." And it was like this moment where you suddenly are like, oh my God. And I had a real belief that like people, even if they didn't literally know that this was the people who made the movie, that they would kind of sense it. That there would be a feeling of like, I don't know. I always think like, maybe this is all like my own psychology, but to me, movies always seemed handed down from gods. They seemed like, well, God gave us another movie. but they felt like these sort of ready-made things. And I always felt like my connection was to theater mainly because I could tell that it was made by people. And I think that sort of reminder that movies are made by people is like a sort of like, it's my way of inserting that into it. But this was like, this became layering all of these, and a lot of these images are like, I mean, the film that, I mean, some of it is Super 8, some of it is phone footage. It became a visual effects big layering thing. And then also, but every part of it is taken from it. So even like there's layers of like, we kept calling them the Malik layers of like grass or like, trees and like,
Right.
there were all these, everything was layered up using the images as they were. So, but it was really, that this was also a late breaker in terms of exactly what it was going to be.
Got it. I think about this because obviously I've worked with Todd Phillips for a number of years, and he's been able to have some movies that have worked financially. And I always think about this because it's a real important thing as a director, right? And it's not, of course, you don't go out to go, I'm going to make a movie that is going to explode the way it did, right?
Yeah.
But it also ties in a little bit to like, you're making a big movie, and you're making a movie that has, I'm sure, a lot of voices in it besides your one, which stands straight through the middle of it in an incredible way. And I don't know if in your previous films, did you have to go through testing or something like this? I don't know if you had to go through it here, but it's a kind of a brutal process, but the end result obviously works, right? And is there something you learned from it that you go, and I just don't know if it's something specific you can speak to, because I've gone through it myself. I know I've gone through it with films I've been a part of, and sometimes it can really take a toll, but sometimes it works out.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny actually, Todd, I got to know Todd a little bit during
because Little Women and Joker and Irishman, it was like that whole year. There you go.
Irishman, and then also it was like one of those things where you just end up seeing each other all the time and you start talking about things. And I asked Todd, I was like, the poster for Joker is so great. That the staircase and the thing. I was like, who designed that poster? And he was like, I did. And I was like, and then how do you have that discussion? Did you test it? And he was like, no, you just, and I was like, gosh. And he was like, don't feel bad. You're on your second movie. You should, this is, you learn how to, but
he probably was like, go make a movie that makes a lot of money. Then you don't have to worry about those things again.
Maybe, I think he was also just sort of speaking to like, I mean, I like making all kinds of movies. I come from extremely independent movies, but I do like the sort of the kind of like, I think if you don't enjoy it, it's hard to do it, but I kind of like the showbiz circus of a studio picture. I like that you're testing it in the Valley. You're going to test it in Jersey and test it in Dallas. And what do the numbers say? And then even a terrible screening, I tested my movie for Little Women too. Or if you get bad, then I feel you get that kind of camaraderie of showing your battle scars with other directors, and they're like, you want a terrible test score? Like, I'll tell you about the test I did in El Segundo, or like whatever, like everybody's got those moments. And I don't know, for me, it feels like being part of this this bananas business and what it is, and kind of navigating all of it. I kind of take pleasure in it. And I think also because I loved theater, there was also I have this like love of the idea of the out of town run. Like you run it in New Haven or you run it in Chicago, and like, and like before you bring it to Broadway, like that kind of like, it feels like an out of town run,
Yes.
Right. For me, it's like, once I have the script, it's like, then it's like everyone who's making the movie, Rodrigo, all the actors, Sarah, everyone who's doing it together and then putting it together, it's like, as long as we all know what the movie should be, or we're all fighting for the same dream no one else can see, then you're fine. I think the terrifying thing would be like if you didn't really know what you wanted it to be, then you're dead in the water because you can't. I don't even know how you begin that. Like that. That's. But I feel like if you've got something that you really sense, like I know what this should be, then you're, you know, it's not that there aren't discussions, but like you're okay.
Yeah, I totally get it. Well, you talk about, you know, I was a juror on a film festival that the criteria was under $100,000 or $200,000, and it was really illuminating to me. And this is, and Rodrigo can speak to this, I'm sure, because of course we care deeply about the photography, but the photography is meaningless without the movie, and the movie is ultimately the most important thing. And I remember thinking, oh, I get to be a jury on this film festival, and I bet my paradigm will be, oh, this was really artfully crafted. And nope. And this is no offense to Joe at all, but we gave it to Hannah Takes the Stairs, and it was like because it was the best film, and it was the one that was made for actually I think the least amount of money with fairly straightforward craftsmanship. No offense to because the film worked.
It was probably me doing some of the camera work, or at least the boom work, when I wasn't in it. Like, I mean, it's I think about that all the time. Obviously, is like the way people watch movies. It's like, it's amazing when like cinematography is, you know, everything comes together, but people watch movies emotionally.
That's 100%.
They watch it with their hearts. They don't watch it a different way. And the best cinematography, the best moments when it all comes together is it works more. It works deeper and it works more. But I always think about that because I'm like, gee, anytime I've tried to impress anyone, try again. Like, they don't care. They're watching with their hearts.
That's right. Well, that's a great way to end it. Well, I really appreciate your time, both of you guys. I mean,
I have one more. But Rodrigo shoots from his heart.
Well, so that's exactly why. But this is exactly why he's Rodrigo, and it's why you hired him, and it's why it's the number one thing that makes him as good as he is at what he does is exactly that.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I'm gonna cry.
I'll just watch this movie again and do that.
Yes, exactly.
But thank you. Like I said, you hit something. You hit a sweet spot that's really hard to do, to make this huge movie that just has so much emotion, and really, like I said, my whole family. It was a joyful moment to go to the movies and see it. Exactly. Right. Yeah. So thank you for the time, and thanks for like a little insight into how you guys made it together.
Thanks for ShotDeck.
Yeah, thank you, ShotDeck. Thanks, Larry.
Hey, you're welcome. You're welcome.